All right, so today we're joined by one of our mentors, Robbie Bent. Robbie's spent a lot of time working in the Ethereum ecosystem with developers, so we're going to hear today a lot about that world and looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us, Robbie. So take it away.
Yeah, totally. So my background, I've been in crypto for about 3 years now. I was the first employee at this project called TrueBit, which was a deeply technical project, layer 2 scaling solution for computation created by Christian Reitweisner, who's the lead dev and creator of Solidity. It's a super technical project. Layer 2 involved protocol design, WebAssembly, interpreter, some other cool stuff. While there, started an initiative called ETHPrize. And as we were building out the architecture for TrueBit, we weren't sure what tooling to use. So kind of went and spoke with other teams that had launched or were launching. So, Augur, Maker, Zeppelin, Aragon. And during these interviews, found out, kind of asked people what problems they had building with Ethereum. And so you can actually see, I can share this data with you, the raw interviews, but you can also see them at each report. And it's just interviews from the best developers in the space and what they've used. Now, the interviews are a little bit old, but it just gives you a good idea of who people are to reach out to. And from this info, we found people were using like custom deployment pipelines, like different forms of testing, different developer tools, like everyone was having problems with debugging, everybody relied on Etherscan. So found, in terms of a package manager, there wasn't really something that worked. So like developing on Ethereum was just like very difficult to get something to work versus traditional web. And then once you had something out, how do you think about upgrades? So just, quite a large on-ramp to like learn. And so we started thinking like, how can we make this easier? And also how do we fund tools for the ecosystem? And so we went around and talked to, the Ethereum Foundation and Web3 and L4 and a bunch of other players in the ecosystem. And a bunch of people provided funding for these bounties. So it was kind of cool because instead of like having people apply for grants, we actually talked to all these different developers, found out what the problems were, and then funded different teams to build these things. And the results were really successful. And so from that work, between that and TrueBit, I ended up creating a really strong network. So one, probably talked to 500 developers last year. In addition to developers, also led the investor relations at TrueBit. So talked to, 50, 60 VCs. I also started a group called the Community of Communities, which was a Telegram group for growth, developer relations, and marketing professionals and community managers. And so met, 300 community professionals. And then at the same time started this thing called ETH Security, which was like a Telegram group for security professionals. And now there's 200 auditors in that group. And that came, when at TrueBit, we were trying to get an audit and their audits were about 70 grand. I just thought like, this isn't fair. This is crazy. If a regular project has 70 grand startup fees just to get their code audited, they'll never be able to launch. There needs to be a better way to determine like who's a legit audit firm and who's not, and where you can go to ask questions. So as a result of this, just have like a really good view into the entire ecosystem. And then after the time at ETHPrize, I actually rolled into the Ethereum Foundation full-time to help with their grants initiative, which was really, really cool. So think through like, it's not super clear exactly how it works now to the external world, but every wave of grants, there's about 150 to 180 applicants. And then a team needs to look through these like highly technical applications and decide like, should this be funded or should it not? Is it the right team? How much funding should they get? And what we realized is that, funding is only one way the Ethereum Foundation can help. So we started this, or are starting this ecosystem support program. And the idea behind the ecosystem support program is, let's say a team applies for a grant, but the grant idea isn't super valuable. However, there might be 4 amazing engineers. So what else could they work on? So it's very much like a switchboard service that can provide, access to different teams that are hiring, that can provide access to researchers that are working on a specific, domain, that can provide Ethereum signaling, that can provide content writing services, whatever it is, non-financial and financial. The idea is that anybody who's trying to get into the ecosystem, there's some type of like organization to help these people. So that's what I'm interested in talking a little bit about today, is just if you're looking for your next project, contact Adam, contact me, can help with introductions across the ecosystem, and can talk through what type of projects you may want to work at, and like where are things seeing adoption. So happy to answer any of those questions. That's pretty much it for now. Maybe we can move into questions around which of those things you guys want to learn more about.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, Robbie. So I guess kind of guys, if you want to put your questions in the chat here, we'll get to them. I can kick it off since you sparked some topics that are close to heart. So what would you say were like some of the most unexpected learnings from that survey that you guys put together? Like, what were you going into it, maybe holding some assumption that got completely invalidated, or on the other hand, what was something that you weren't expecting to learn that kind of stuck out as sort of like a major learning from talking to all those devs?
Yeah, I think was just the ramp up time was like, it wasn't necessarily unexpected, but it just really hammered home how hard it was to learn Ethereum kind of a year and a half ago. And so if you can't debug your code, it's just very hard to find out when there's an error. And then also how hard upgrades are, right? And so you kind of think once you put something out there, it's immutable, it can't be changed. That was kind of the way smart contracts were envisioned. However, putting something out there that can't be changed before you've actually tested it with real users is also something that's not done in the Web 2 world. So like figuring out that, I still don't think there's like a clear method for doing that right now. So what's kind of working is people are putting stuff out there and then running governance internally and, allowing for changes and like for changes to happen slowly, which I think is probably the right way. But watching that at the time, both of those things were sort of unexpected.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
It was also I was shocked at how many people were building their own tools. Yeah. So deployment pipelines, like testing and code coverage tools, and like how many different sets of tools people use. So I think there's like 4 separate IDEs. There's like Embark, Truffle, Remix, which Remix was actually like people really liked for auditing and debugging. Yeah. But yeah, a bunch of different tools and then like when a new tool came out, a lot of people wouldn't have heard of it. And so there wasn't that was one huge thing actually, was that like documentation. I was shocked at like how poor it was a year ago. And it's just because like the team that's developing, when they're moving super fast, it's hard to also document as fast as you're developing. And so you have this lag. And then the only people on the teams that can really document are those who were doing the actual development. And it's not like best practices for a lot of teams. So was really tough. Like, Web3 would have all these errors, Web3.js would have all these errors and like all these issues open, and like it was kind of like nobody was maintaining it. And so it's pretty shocked to see like you have 100 teams and all this money, but then there's all these places where you can add value. So I think if you're a developer and you're wanting to work on like core infrastructure, developer tools, there's teams hiring for that. There's like awesome projects. There's like things that make it easier to build on Ethereum is something that's like super needed. When you have 20 layer 1 chains coming out, there'll be like 2 things, right? One is like 3 things. One is community around a project. So like, do you have like-minded people you can talk to about your ideas? 2 is liquidity. So for any of these financial instruments like Dharma, YDX, any decentralized financial protocol, you need liquidity. So if I'm going to go and give a loan, there needs to be a borrower on the other side. And then the 3rd is developer experience. So if I'm going to build something, how fast can I build it? How secure will it be? How nice is the developer experience? So if you're thinking about like something to work on, those 3 things are like key buckets.
Cool. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So we got a few questions in the chat here. It looks like next, Ankit, you want to choose one of your questions that you can sit in there?
So like I have a bit controversial one. Like, what do you think about on-chain governance personally? Like as a part of the Ethereum ecosystem.
Yeah.
The questions around on-chain governance. So what's your sort of take on that in general?
So is the question about on-chain scaling, or it's on-chain governance?
Yeah. Like, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so personal opinion, I'm not super deep on governance. From what I've seen, I really like the way Maker is operating. And so it's kind of, things that are voted on aren't put into the code directly. So I think it's fine to have votes for signaling purposes among shareholders, but then I think the team of developers, while protocols are in their infancy, should maintain control. probably controversial. Some people are like, oh, it should be decentralized from the beginning and token holders should have a vote. But I just think keeping in mind that these things are very research-based. Nobody knows how they're going to react. Nobody knows how the token models are going to work at scale. There's tons of problems with development. There can be security issues. I think having a team of like core developers and some trusted ecosystem large holders of the tokens have signaling sessions where people vote, but then the core developers make the decision makes a lot of sense. Now, how you go from that piece to fully decentralized is like still unclear. But I would look, if we were looking at governance, I would look to the way that Maker is operating now as sort of like what I think is the best example.
So I think the whole idea where Decred, what do you call it, gave around 75 million in their treasury to be deployed using on-chain governance, like that happened in the beginning of there. So I think that is one big experiment happening over there. So like, other than that, Tejas is something which is doing some pretty good stuff. Other than that, wait, come to my next question. So when we talk of Ethereum 2.0, like there are at least like 9 to 10 clients, 9 to 10 pretty incredible people working on something of that sort. So how does a non-tech guy start contributing to Ethereum 2.0? Like I saw.
Yeah, so Ethereum 2.0 requires project management and like somebody. So there's a guy who's an engineer, he's technical, but his name's Danny Ryan, and he's sort of leading this, like let's call it a domain group on behalf of Ethereum Foundation, like talking to each of the client development teams and updating on what they're doing. And so I think that there's like more of a need for project managers to be talking to the 10 client teams, interviewing them, coming back with what the problems they're having, what the updates there are, and then like sourcing all that into a report for the ecosystem. So Danny is doing that, but like I think I can ask if there's additional help required. But I think like for all these things like Plasma, state channels, coordination mechanisms that are going, if you're a project manager going to each of these teams, trying to keep abreast of what they're doing and then comparing and contrasting them in reports would be helpful for the ecosystem.
Okay. All right. So next question comes from Devashish, I believe. He's looking, I don't know if he's on the mic there, but maybe he wants to ask his question. If not, I can rephrase it. So it looks like he's asking sort of what are the best apps so far developed on the ETH platform. I guess that's a pretty broad question, but is there anything that you've seen recently that kind of stuck out, Robbie, in terms of like, hey, this is really novel, this is really cool, like something you're looking at recently?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of really cool stuff, which we can get into in more detail. I can actually share, give me 1 second. I'm going to share something with you guys that you can research. Hold on, I'm just going to pull up the document. Now this is about, where's the chat? This is about 3 months old, and it's not fully completed, but it's just a list of kind of like all the dev tools I've seen, all the design patterns for user onboarding, all the games, a whole bunch of financial dApps. So there's just like hundreds of links to different projects. Some of them have notes, and I've done like actual UI UX audits and like written about them, but others are just open. But if you're just looking to like look through, hey, what are all the Ethereum things? There's like some cool stuff in there. So feel free to use it. But just in terms of what I think are awesome, I mean, I'm really impressed with Dharma and DYDX, teams that built protocols and then built apps on top of them that an end user can actually like use. So Dharma's had like a massive focus on design. So now they've changed their branding to just like the easiest place to earn interest on your crypto, which is like really cool because like pretty much anybody that has ETH in like, a period of like 3 minutes can go to their site and start lending and earning a return. So like clear use case, anybody who has ETH that wants to hold their ETH should earn interest on it. So like, I think that's really powerful. Imagine, being able to get interest on your money in 30 seconds without using a bank or an intermediary. Like that's pretty cool. And what does that look like when, out of $100 billion in ETH, there's whatever, 70 billion, whatever the market cap is now, maybe it's 12 billion. Let's say they can get, 1 billion of that. That's like real money that people can borrow in the real world. I really like the Wire protocol. They've had a new They have a new API that allows you to convert debit and credit cards into crypto. So this is like really important for games and other low volume transactions. So it kind of makes it much easier to onboard users from the real world. I think that's going to be huge. Ether gas station, super, super cool. There's a partnership with Tabuki and Zeppelin, which you guys should take a look at. And it's just allowing decentralized relayers of meta transactions. So basically, if you don't have Ethereum and you're using someone else's token, you can still send transactions without actually holding Ethereum, which is another barrier to adoption. I think there's like really cool games up and coming. I like the Horizon games and the Skyweaver team. I've seen some of their art. It looks awesome. So I'm really excited about like games bringing people into crypto. Maker is super cool, very similar to Dharma in that you can, basically earn a return on your crypto, but with Maker, you can then actually leverage that crypto. I guess you can do the same thing with Dharma. But so all these different ways of borrowing and lending in a decentralized environment, I think are what's like really cool now, and things that are targeting traders. So super excited about where those go for the next bit of the year, but happy to talk through more things as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think does that touch on your question, Prashant? You were asking around sort of what are the bottlenecks in terms of adoption. Are you talking on the developer side or on the user side of things, or both?
Yeah, it pretty much did answer my question. So we can move on to the next one.
Okay, cool.
I think so. There's more problems than that. Like the major thing is having to use MetaMask to sign a transaction. So there's two things, right? For a normal person, it's like, okay, what is this Chrome extension? People don't feel comfortable adding it, or don't feel comfortable keeping their Ether in it, or like just don't know what it is and don't want to learn. So like for the first CryptoKitties game, the actual drop off was like 95% in that piece of the funnel. And so if you have that kind of churn, it's very hard to have a successful product. So that goes for sort of any game, any of these financial tools, just making that piece easier. So there are a lot of wallets that are tackling this. There's Portis and Fortmatic, which are JavaScript SDKs. They're not Chrome extensions. So you use a normal username, password in the browser. That's pretty cool. I think the other problem is just private key management in general. So SpankChain had launched and had this problem where, even though they've explained what everything is, a high percent of people would message and say, hey, I lost my password. Can I get another one? And you can't do that. And so I think even just explaining to people, like, people are so, it's so entrenched the behavior of, hey, this is your username, this is your password. That's how the entire web works and has worked for 20 years. So when you tell people like, no, a lot of people don't know what decentralization is or don't understand, especially if they want to play a game. So explaining to them like what a private key is basically impossible. Like the human attention span is a few minutes, 30 seconds. So figuring out how to better manage private keys or, how to do that, I think is something that's like still missing. Some teams are working on it, but I think once private key management plus user onboarding / like better extensions are solved, it'll make games and some other things like significantly easier to use.
Yeah. That's awesome. So yeah, so I guess the next question is kind of related to this as well. So we may have touched on it already, but Andre is asking sort of what lesser known tools are there that you think will sort of be enablers for Ethereum developers? And I guess you touched on a few categories. I'm particularly interested, sorry for co-opting your question, Andre, but in the private key management stuff, I have seen a few projects like things like Neuro Protocol and folks like that kind of trying to find solutions for making a more seamless, sort of more traditional kind of layer of authentication on top of the protocol. So are there things like that you've seen also that are maybe lesser known or teams working on, that particular problem when it comes to signing up new users and having to manage their keys?
Yes, so I'm not aware of how Near is doing it. Awesome team, super great guys. I don't know the mechanism behind it, but there's a number of teams that are trying to implement some type of Samir secret sharing. So, for social recovery. So you're sharding your key in a bunch of pieces to a bunch of people Now, there are problems with collusion, but there's a bunch of teams that are looking to solve that. So, if you do forget your key, you can ping 2 or 3 people or maybe a service, a number of these services. So, maybe you trust centralization that like these 4 services can store pieces of your key or whatever number it is. So I think that will exist. I know, I forget the teams that I'll have to look back at my notes. I was working on that, but I know there's a few.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Andre, feel free to jump in if that didn't answer your question or you have a follow-up, but that was my own personal interest.
Yeah,
so,
in terms of less known tools for Ethereum development, I think this Ether gas station and these meta transactions are pretty cool. So they're being wrapped up and integrated by Zepkit from Zeppelin. So they're creating like a fully new developer environment that's going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah, shout out to Ramon, who's also a mentor at Bridge, who's working on that stuff, I'm sure. So he's got his hands full in there.
Yeah, so I would take a look at that particular development environment. They're like really, I mean, their customers have been developers for the last 4 years. They're really deep into crypto and like very concerned about making an awesome user experience and focused on product. So if you want to test something new and you want to provide feedback, I would definitely go check that out.
Yep, I second that. Cool. All right. Yeah, go for it. We got time for a few more questions here, I think, but Ankit, go for it.
Okay, so like one thing that we have been seeing very recently is that like a lot of people are combining these protocols. So like people are leveraging different sort of protocols. Like some people are building on top of Augur. So what kind of applications do you think are going to come on top of a network such as MakerDAO? Like there's something called InstaDApp, which is more like a decentralized bank being built on top of it. The team from India only. Similarly, there's New. So like any other apps do you think which are possible just through the MakerDAO ecosystem, the way they have built it? And like obviously when it comes to like funding mechanisms, these guys like they have discovered different use cases. Like there's so recently there was this case where where one of the CDPs of the InstaDApp team I guess the debt of 500 DAI was wiped out by some anonymous user. So that was a case of funding projects through CDPs. So like, do you see any other use cases of MakerDAO coming up like this?
Yeah, I think there's two types of use cases. One, like nobody really knows for any of these things, like what's going to happen, right? It's still like super new. A lot of like the usability bugs are being fixed. So I think there's two use cases for these types of protocols. One is that something that automates a piece. So if you look at that, like Veil would be something that's kind of automating a bunch of pieces of Augur. For Maker, there's Easy CDP, which is like a front end interface that makes it really easy to set up your own CDP. And then there was another I saw the other day that was like a decentralized lending agent. So I forget the name of it. It was one of the winners of the Denver hackathon. But if you're about to get busted, this service would step in and fund your collateral and then charge you later. So if you're not around and not watching your CDP, it was sort of like an insurance mechanism. So I think those are things that like help the specific protocol make it easier to use. Then on the other side, there's like what are the use cases, right? And so like I think one awesome use case was XDAI and the burner wallet for like a specific pop-up event. That's pretty cool, and I can see how that might be used in like developing countries. Yeah, so that's cool, but I think we're still a little bit away from being able to like borrow in the real world. So there's still, something missing from taking, hey, all this DAI has been locked up. I'm going to go and borrow this DAI, convert it to cash in my daily life, use that cash, come back and, pay off my loan. And some people actually did that. So there's some good articles on the Maker blog from last year where people like leverage their ETH to buy a car or a house. Now that really works for current crypto holders, which is cool. It's actually, much easier if you had $100,000 in crypto to turn that crypto into DAI, convert that DAI into cash and take out a $50,000 loan, let's say, that you can then use for a car payment or whatever. However, if you don't already have crypto, that doesn't make sense. So I think as more and more people earn crypto somehow, whether through staking or like winning at games or, mining for specific projects like Filecoin and these others, once more assets come into the system, there will be more that you can borrow against. So same as like security tokens could be great for Maker, right? And so I think we're still, until the stuff is like really, really useful, there needs to be more people holding crypto and more ways to spend your cryptos. I think that's what's kind of like holding things up.
So there's something called Flux Market which came up, so which combines Augur, like I'm not sure if they combine Augur. So they leverage a bunch of platforms to create a derivative markets for
yeah, I think it's called Flux.
Yeah, Flux.market.
Yeah.
Joseph is working on it. So he's one in the Finality Labs.
Cool. Yeah, I think it combines 0x, Maker, Augur, and something else.
Yeah, they combine a bunch of things, like create a really cool thing.
Also amazing, right? So if you think like to create a derivative now with a bank like Goldman Sachs, it's like millions, tens of millions of dollars possibly. The size of the market, legal requirements are very strict. So being able to do this individually between two people to provide insurance against risk is like pretty interesting. It'll be really cool to see. I just think it's still a bit of a ways from like finding the killer use case for the derivative, abstracting away all the blockchain and like thought. And so somebody can just go to a web UI and like click a button and you know what type of risk you're insuring against. So yeah, that's really, really cool. I think more stuff like that will continue to pop up, but really excited to see the first thing that gets like, breakaway traction, which I don't think we've seen yet.
Yeah. Okay. I have one more question, the last one.
Sure.
Okay. Last one.
Okay. How do you think the whole, so like 1 year ago, everyone in Ethereum was talking about the token curated registry. Do you think, I haven't seen any big use case other than like there's a consensus project and there's a Twitter handle which maintains a TCR of top people following on crypto Twitter. But other than that, I haven't seen use cases. So, do you have any companies in mind who are working on implementing TCRs?
I haven't followed TCRs in a ton of detail. If you want to know more, there was an article from the Giveth guys. I can send you. You can ping me after. But they were working on like some type of bonding curves for charity, for cleanup, with then like a TCR to vote on which of these initiatives would work. But I don't know much about it.
Okay, I'll just ping you for that.
Cool. All right, guys. I think that's just about all the time we have. But Robbie, thanks again. This has been super informative. I think you have a very unique point of view, kind of from where you're sitting, and thanks for taking time to kind of share all this information with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and if again, offer goes out, just trying to, mostly my mission is to help people in this ecosystem. So if you guys have, questions about projects, you want intros to projects, you can go through Adam, and happy to try and help.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again.
Cool. Later, guys.
Take care.